This is Black Market Leadership, the underground resource for disruptors and status quo breakers.
Hello all, welcome back to Black Market Leadership. Boy, do we have an episode for you today. I am extraordinarily excited to talk about this subject. Today we're going to talk about the new Netflix series, The Queen's Gambit. I loved this series. Loved it. I adored it. I found it extraordinarily inspirational. And I think it's a show that needs to be discussed. Now, saying that, this episode is not going to be an analysis of the series. No, I'm not going to do that. If for those of you who don't know me, Kevin Black of Black Market Leadership, one of the things that we do is we use streaming services as a tool, as a resource to support people in tailored coaching. So instead of reading our leadership or management book, we watch series, and from those different series, we pluck out the incredible important lessons like management, behaviors, strategic thinking, all the things which are important to leadership, management, ownership of a company. You can pluck them out of a series. And recently, we just finished The People versus O.J. Simpson on Netflix, and I spent 25 hours doing an analysis, a total analysis. So not going to do that here. My goal here is not to analyze this show, but really, well, not to analyze this show in terms of its parts, but what I would do is I want to focus on some themes which I think are essential, absolutely essential, and I would say required for those people who want to be disruptive, who want to break the status quo, who want to be a thought leader, people who really want to make their mark in the world. I think this show is just, it's not just inspirational, it's revitalize. It's a way to revitalize the spirit, to help you refocus, to show you that greatness can be achieved. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to give you a perspective which I think is not necessarily out there. Well, I know it's not out there because I've seen some of the reviews, and the reviews are interesting. A lot of people focus on the drug dependency. Some people focus on the 60s, the social injustices there, all things which are important, but in essence, that's not what the story is about. The story is about a young woman, a girl who turns into a young woman. She is a genius. She is a natural talent in the game of chess. And this story is about her actualization of her potential. She faces different conflicts. And guess what? She overcomes those conflicts to become herself, to become the great person that she could have been and ultimately is. Let me just give you some other elements about this. Now, we focus on leadership and management, movies, series, things that support you. This movie is not directly about leadership. It's not directly about entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, thought leadership, not directly. Why this movie is important to leadership and to those things I just mentioned is that, well, let me back up. I've always said, if you're going to study leadership, if you're going to study strategy, you can't just study those things, strategy or leadership. They're very limited. You have to study the core components which make them, which compose them. And one of the most important, it's probably not the most important, the most fundamental element of leadership is self-awareness, is knowing exactly who you are and what you're really, really good at. It's knowing your values, what you stand up for, what you stand for, those things which motivate you to get up, get out of bed and do the things that you want to do, to stay motivated, to stay inspired. This movie really is about that fundamental element of identity, of self-awareness. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to give you a breakdown, just a little bit of the plot, and we'll talk about the aesthetics or the style, the direction, which is just absolutely fantastic. What a beautiful series. Beautiful. But most importantly, we're going to cover the themes, the undercurrent ideas underneath them. And I think there's some ideas in there which are just absolutely fantastic. And they really go to, if you're a high performer, high achiever, whatever the term is today, this is a show for you, especially if you, again, want to disrupt. So let's jump into The Queen's Gambit. Now, I want to do this a little differently. Instead of me just jumping into the story, let me ask you a question. What are the requirements for disruption, for challenging the status quo? What are the individual, personal, you might even say spiritual requirements needed to do this? Think of all the sniping, the naysayers, the people who don't believe it, who are going to challenge you the whole way. Think about the established structures, the mature industries, these things that have been there for years. People believe in it. People, that's how they make their paychecks. And you're going to challenge them. What do you think is required to do that of a person? Well, one, I think you have to know your purpose. You have to actually have a purpose in life. And I don't mean just mere survival, but or even thriving. I mean a real purpose which you have a conviction to stay focused on and to drive forward. You also have to be an individual, which requires individualism. You have to know yourself. You have to have that conviction and self-esteem and confidence to stay true to who you are and to what you're good at and to drive forward, especially during this fog of war where all this friction is coming your way and you know what's coming your way. And I think there's another element too. You have to have a certain philosophical worldview, even perception of the world, of the universe, of people, of things, of your environment. I think if you have all these things, again, the purpose, individualism, the philosophical worldview, perception of others, I think if you have those wrapped together and you have a positive one that's constructive, one that's really made for you, tailored to you, then the odds are stacked in your favor. But a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people do not have that, especially in my experience. You find 40, 50, 60-year-old men and women who really don't know the purpose. This show shows you that it's possible. It's absolutely possible to have that purpose. You just got to do the work to get it, to find it, to discover it, and then you got to drive forward with it. So saying that, what are those requirements? I think those are the requirements. Now, the reason why I'm doing an episode on this series is because you could draw this series in sharp contrast to the modern day culture. Modern day culture. I think those things which I just explained to you don't exist a lot. And I think of anything, there are elements of the show which really just go against what people are hearing, seeing today. And to me, this is what really drew me into the show. I felt like an alien delivered the show because it was so great. It was so new. And it was so counter to what we hear today. So let me give you just a couple of points that I wrote down that I think you'll see the sharp contrast. One, this is not a show about wokeness or political correctness at all. It's true. Beth Harmon, our heroine, is a female. She's from a young girl to a young lady. She drives forward. And she's not there to break glass ceilings, even though it does happen. That's not what the show was about. The show was about her as an individual. And there's a great scene where she's being interviewed by Life magazine, and the reporter asks her, "What's it like to be a female, to be a girl in the chess world?" And what's her response? She didn't think about it. She didn't see herself like that. I loved it. So that's why I think this show, even though it's a heroine, you could be a male or a female and watch this and be absolutely inspired. It's not about gender. It's about individualism. She is an individual. She is a person with a rare talent. She's a genius, and you root for her. Another element that I think it really goes counter, a modern element, which is this show goes counter to, that this is not a show about celebrity culture. In fact, one review I saw of Queen's Gambit talks about this is her struggle or her journey to fame. It has nothing to do with fame. It's true she becomes famous, but how does she become famous? Through hard work. She busts her ass in this. She really goes above and beyond to develop her talent. And this is not about worshiping celebrities at all, especially ones who really don't have talent. Beth Harmon has great talent, and she learns to develop it, to hone it. And as a consequence of her successes, she becomes famous. But again, this show has nothing to do with celebrity culture. The other element, which I just loved and why it's counter to today's modern culture, this show does not smuggle in political or religious themes at all. So, for instance, there is no talk of humility in this show, and thank God for it. I am sick and tired of seeing people talk about humility. You could probably tell I'm opinionated on this, and I'm going to give you an explanation why. As you probably know, a lot of leadership consultants will talk about you got to be humble, but not really too humble. Just don't be arrogant. Let me give you an alternative view here. Aristotle, the greatest Western philosopher, really the philosopher of the West, said that of all the virtues of mankind, pride is the greatest. It is the crown virtue. Now, what does pride mean? Pride is the understanding, the objective understanding and sense of accomplishment that one can wear, knowing what one has done. I have done X and I am proud of it. I accept that I have done this accomplishment. That's what pride is. It really is accepting and taking pleasure in knowing what you have accomplished. Now, saying that, there are some people who like to exaggerate. They're filled with hyperbole. They're braggarts. They talk about doing things, or they talk about doing things which are beyond their capability, and they brag about it. You would call these people arrogant. This is an excess of pride, and it's a vice. People who have this excess of pride are called arrogant, and it's not a good thing. But guess what? There's a flip side to this. And the flip side to arrogance is humility. According to Aristotle, humility is a vice because it is a deficiency of pride. That's the person who has said, if you in your life have achieved X, Y, and Z, but for some reason, maybe it's imposter syndrome, maybe you lack the self-esteem or self-confidence, whatever it is, you say, well, I really did X and I did Y, but no, I didn't do Z. Look, if you're going to take on the big industries, the big talent, if you're going to change the status quo, you have to have some brass tacks to you. Humility is not going to support you. And the great thing about Beth Harmon is she knows she's good. She wears it with pride. And there are some times where you can sense there's a sense of arrogance to her sometimes, but reality hits her and she accepts it. And then she realizes her talents and maybe the limits to those talents. But what does she do? She works herself. She works herself to hone those skills to become greater. So in this sense, there's no religious theme. There's no talk of humility. There's just objective pride. There's no talk of living for a higher cause. This show, in a sense, is just a celebration of the individual, of the creator, and not as a servant to others. Now, I also said there's no political themes. That's true. There's no victimization here. And it's true. Beth Harmon has had a hard childhood, being an orphan, being adopted by a family who has some issues. But there's no victimization. There's no reveling in her misery. She sees it. This is where she's at in life. And what does she do? She's like, okay, I'm going to get past it, get beyond it. So I love it. And also, there's no envy. Beth Harmon is great at what she does. And people, even her competitors, when they face her, they realize she's great. But do they hate her for it? No, there's no hating the good for being the good. What you find is that others even appreciate and admire her success. So in a sense, I feel like this show was dropped from a different world. I loved this universe. I just love this universe, which was, I don't spoil it and I'm going to get into this universe. But saying that, overall, this show is just in sharp contrast to modern culture today. It really is. And to me, that in itself makes it a must watch. Now, let's talk about the story of Queen's Gambit. I told you already that I love this story. And out of 3 components, theme, plot, style, 5 out of 5 for all of them. Now, let me just talk briefly about the plot. Now, you know that it's Beth Harmon, our heroine. She is an orphan. She rises to greatness. What we see is her journey through that. We know that she goes to an orphanage. There, she makes a friend. She meets the janitor. There she learns the art, where she learns about chess, and there she sees her talent and develops it. We see her adopted by a family, and then we see her going to all these different tournaments, just beating the hell out of all these other chess players. So that's really her journey. But in this journey, there are different conflicts. There's several conflicts. The first major conflict is her home life. After the orphanage, when she gets out, you find that her mother, in a sense, is not really a mother. It's almost like a peer-to-peer relationship, which is not very healthy for a young woman or a young man to have. So that's one conflict. How does she deal? How does she interact with her mother, who is not so motherly, but instead, in a sense, becomes dependent on her, making money through chess? The other element, the big element, is the drug dependency. In the orphanage, she becomes addicted to tranquilizers. And ultimately, through her mother's influence, she becomes addicted to alcohol. And we see this, and this is a real struggle, but it's not a struggle that you can beat her up on at all, because you see the tranquilizers help her see her talent with more clarity. It helps her, it becomes a tool. And obviously the alcoholism, again, I'm not going to get into psychology, but overall, she does struggle with them, and she has some pretty, some bad times, but she overcomes them. She overcomes them, which is just, again, another fantastic element of this heroine, of how she overcomes the odds. So just a great story. And let me just say, for the drug and the alcohol addiction, it looks extraordinarily lifelike. Those scenes, it looks very, very realistic, and you really empathize with her. You can see the attraction to it. So just great writing. Another conflict that I see is independence. You see, she's already a strong, independent young girl. And again, as a young woman, she really, really retains that independence. But one thing you see is that she learns that independence, being an individual, does not mean being an isolationist, does not mean isolating from others, which in a sense is just self-destructive. Instead, she learns to live on her own terms. She learns to know who she is, and she'll see that she sticks to her own values, her own motivators. She knows who she is, and she becomes very selective around the people that she hangs around and who support her. And notice she hangs around the A players, the people who have talent, who are like her. So in a sense, she learns not to be an isolationist, but she learns to take hold of herself. She knows who she is. She's comfortable around others. And then she invites those around her who bring her value to be into her circle of friends. Another conflict is again, maybe this is the theme, but she's just overcoming her fears. And again, what does she do? She fights the ultimate competitor, the Soviets, these people who have been training since childhood. And ultimately, I think when I say self-actualization, well, the story is about self-actualization, what we see is not only does she develop her talents, but she becomes Beth Harmon, the person, the individual. She doesn't have to prove herself to anyone at the end. She's proved herself to herself, and you can see she is extraordinarily comfortable in her shoes. She has a level of self-esteem, of pride, objective pride. She has all the makings. She's a hero, a heroine, and just a fantastic, fantastic plot. So that's one element. The other element I'll talk briefly on is the style and direction. Wow. What an absolutely beautiful, beautiful show. The costumes, the clothing, the manners, the buildings, the cars, everything looks clean, nice. I was just blown away. So, and let me say also about Beth, her red hair makes her stick out. To me, this is a great lesson, especially in writing. The style absolutely is consistent with the plot. Here's a person who is rising to greatness. She sticks out from the crowd. She has her own identity, her own brand. And especially when she competes against a lot of these guys in their drab color suits, she just brings new life to in her journey of disruption. The style is just a gorgeous, gorgeous series. And I just remember watching it, and I was just blown away by Mexico City, by Moscow, by the clothing, her hair, everything, just amazing. Totally consistent with the story, 5 out of 5. Now, let's get into what really matters for this presentation, for this episode, I should say, the theme. There are different themes here underlying the story. And when I say a theme, let me be really clear. A theme is the underlying story, a concept, an abstraction, which really carries the story, which really gives the story meaning. A plot is the structure. So, for instance, we know Beth Harmon is a great chess player, and that's the plot. We see this plot through her journey, through the home life, through the drug dependency, through the tournament. But what's really important here is the theme. Now, think about this. The theme, one theme, for instance, is individualism. Purpose is another theme. Being reality focused is another theme. Notice, let's say we strip away the chess and we say Beth Harmon lives in the 1980s and she's a mechanic. She's a genius mechanic. And ultimately, she's going to show herself to be the genius as she was in chess as in being a mechanic. That's what a theme could do. With a theme, you could strip away the mechanics of the plot or the structure and still have the same story. So that's what I mean by theme. Now here, let me start at one major, maybe this is not necessarily a theme, but there's an underlying current throughout all the themes, and it's very unique to this. There is a concept that was coined by Ayn Rand, which is called the benevolent universe. And to me, this just stuck out. It just stuck out that I was amazed. And I think it's one of the things that really attracted me just to this show, to this series, this sense of life of Beth Harmon and her journey. Let me define to you, let me give you a definition of the benevolent universe. Now, this comes from a great book by Ayn Rand called The Return of the Primitive, the Anti-Industrial Revolution. And this book was about it's about the movement called the New Left back in the 60s and 70s, which ironically was against individualism, against capitalism. But let me give you two little paragraphs here to give you an understanding what a benevolent universe is, a benevolent universe as opposed to a malevolent universe. Quote, again, from Return of the Primitive. There is a fundamental conviction which some people never acquire. Some hold only in their youth, and a few hold to the end of their days. The conviction that ideas matter. That ideas matter means that knowledge matters, that truth matters, that one's mind matters. Its consequence is the inability to believe in the power or the triumph of evil. No matter what corruption one observes in one's immediate background, one is unable to accept it as normal, permanent, or metaphysically right. And metaphysically, it means just the nature of the universe. Is the world against you, or is the world just exists? Continuing, one feels this injustice or terror or falsehood or frustration or pain or agony is the exception in life, not the rule. Let me say that again. One feels that this injustice or terror or falsehood or frustration or pain or agony is the exception in life, not the rule. One feels certain that somewhere on earth, even if not anywhere in one's surroundings or within one's reach, a proper human way of life is possible to human beings and that justice matters. I love that. And so what does that mean? This movie does not live in a malevolent universe, which we'll go into in a second. Notice it's extraordinarily optimistic. Again, there's no envy. The people see Beth Harmon for the genius that she is, and they admire it. Her competitors fear it. It's just a very positive view. It doesn't focus on the 1950s and the 1960s, where those injustices were in society. It doesn't focus on that. Those existed, but that is not the exclusive focus. What matters is Beth, the individual, achieving greatness. That's what a benevolent universe really means. It's seeing not just the greatness in people, but coming to the world and seeing the world that, look, this place exists. It's got its good, it's got its good elements, it's got its bad elements. But you know what? I can make my mark. I am able to make my mark. I am worthy. I am worthy of making my mark. That's a benevolent universe. And I think if you're going to be a disruptor or challenge the status quo, that is an extraordinarily healthy philosophical outlook to have. To not focus on those things, those environmental factors, which they may slow you down, they may put you down. But if you become a victim and see nothing but victimization, you're not going to be a success in life. You're not going to be, because you're not focusing on what could be. You're just focusing on those negative things, which are just temporary. So this leads to the opposite of a benevolent view, a malevolent universe. Now, what is a malevolent universe? Now, she explains this, Ayn Rand does, in her book, another great book, The Virtue of Selfishness. Oh, great book. And this is from a essay called The Ethics of Emergencies. A malevolent, now quote, a malevolent universe metaphysics on the theory that man, by his very nature, is helpless, is doomed, that success, happiness, achievement are impossible to him, that emergencies, disasters, catastrophes are the norm of his life, and that his primary goal is to combat them. Now, let me say that again. The malevolent universe metaphysics, by its very nature, says that man is helpless and doomed, that success, happiness, and achievement are impossible to him, that emergencies, disasters, catastrophes are the norm in life, and that his primary goal is to combat them. That is a poisonous, toxic view of the world. And I would tell you, a lot of people have it. A lot of people do. These are the naysayers, the people who look at the challenges in life and who shudder. They see the challenges like, no, thank you. And these are also people who look down upon the achievers, who look down upon people of success. So let me give you an example. This is not necessarily a naysayer. By the way, if you want to see a naysayer, read just some of the reviews of the Queen's Gambit and look at the focus. Is the focus of the review on Beth Harmon and her genius and rising and self-actualizing, or is it about the drug dependency? Is it about her living in a socially unjust world? Those are if those are the elements of your focus for the show, that probably is an indicator you might have a malevolent universe outlook. But here I have a tweet by a guy I follow, Michael Malice. This guy's great. Michael Malice. And if you haven't seen him, go to Amazon, check out some of his books. Really fascinating, really smart guy. But he had a tweet. Now, this is not necessarily about, he is not a malevolent universe kind of guy, but he's talking about a malevolent universe. And I love this tweet. So I just got to share it with you. And the tweet says this, and I think it's kind of relevant to the Queen's Gambit. At least someone's, if someone has a negative view of the show, I think this probably explains who they are. Obedient people are enraged at those who defy norms because it proves that their submission has in fact been a moral choice, which is something they seek to avoid having to make. Love that. So I think if there are people who hate the Queen's Gambit, that's probably them. So saying that, going back to the themes, I think the benevolent universe shows a real appreciation for talent, for genius. It's a real celebration of it. And most importantly for you, I think if you have a benevolent universe outlook, you see Beth Harmon and you say, you know what? I may not be a genius, but success, greatness, I'm worthy of it and I can struggle for it. And by watching this, I know that it's real, that it exists and I can do it. So to me, that is extraordinarily positive theme, or at least undercurrent. I think another theme in here is purpose. Now, this is incredibly important. Now, by purpose, I mean being productive. And I don't mean just going to your job and doing your job and just surviving day to day, but having a goal, not just a goal, but a real focus in life. How do you become a productive individual? Beavers build dams, sharks, do their thing in the water. All creatures out there have certain instincts. They do certain things. Humans have the capability, have the ability to become rational. And at the ultimate rationality, you see skyscrapers, hospitals, you see all this technology, the iPhone, you see all this technology. That in a sense is a productive goal, a productive purpose. What's your purpose in life? And what you see in this show is Beth Harmon has a purpose to be the best chess player there is, and knows she is exclusively focused on it. And I think one of the best tips or recommendations a comedian that I really enjoy, Adam Carolla, said this, do what you love and make sure you can make money from it. You can do that. Do what you love and make money from it. If you can meet those two metrics for success, you got your purpose. And I would say also notice too, there's almost an inverse lesson in purpose here, in the sense that when you look at Beth's mother, after they adopted, you learn about a mother and you see her mother had talents. She had real talents and with the piano and singing. And what you notice is she did not capitalize on her purpose. For whatever reason, she didn't capitalize. And you see the lost opportunity and you really feel for her. And you see that Beth sees it too. And she says, and I think mentally she'll say to herself, that's not going to be me. I'm going to actualize my potential. There's one life. I live it on earth and I'm going to do my best. So the theme of purpose is extraordinarily strong in this. Another theme which supports purpose is individualism. Another great theme running through this. This is, if there was a series about individualism, this is it. There's no denying Beth Harmon knows who she is and she does what she wants to. And, today I talked to you earlier about humility. People who talk about humility, that's one end of the spectrum. Don't show pride, be humble, be modest. Don't ask for too much. They have that view because they see the opposite view of the Machiavellian. They're the people who are arrogant and who take advantage of others. Two extremes over here, right? Well, there's a third alternative you may have not heard of, called rational selfishness. Yes, rationally selfish, meaning having those values which are good for you, which benefit you, and they don't rob from others. They don't deny anyone else their values or their rights. Beth Harmon is a rationally selfish person. And one of her struggles is, and I mentioned earlier, the conflict. How independent is she? How much of an individual is she? Sometimes she self-isolates, which isn't helpful. But ultimately, she develops her own values and she sticks to them. Boy, does she stick to them. There's a scene where the Christian group comes up and they want to sponsor her to go to the Soviet Union. It's free money. She could use it, but they want her to sign a form where she's speaking with her voice, where she stands for certain elements or certain causes, which she doesn't really believe in. So she says, no, I'm not going to do it. Not only that she pays them back for services rendered, in a sense, for the money they've donated. She sticks to her values. She knows who she is. And I think if you're going to be successful, if you want to be a thought leader, if you're going to be a disruptor, you got to know who you are. You have to stand up for something. And sometimes you're going to make enemies. And if I remember, Winston Churchill, I think he has a great quote. If you made enemies, good. It means you stood up for something. So the theme of individualism is strong. Another thing about Beth, which is fascinating, is behaviors. Now, this goes to this theme of individualism. As you know, in Black Market Leadership, one of the things we do is we do behavioral profiling. Now, let me say at the outset, you do not profile people without the tool. You have to have the scientific tool to do it, because people modify, they role play. Many times you see people and they're modifying themselves, trying to influence your perception of them. But since we're watching a show, and since this is a fictional character, and we're basically a fly on the wall, you're seeing who she is. I would say that her most dominant characteristic is dominance. She is a high dominant behavioral profile, without a doubt. Her lowest trait might be patience, in terms of she likes variety. She's a fast mover. She gets bored. I think you can see she gets bored easily. But when you take the high dominance and that low patience, you have someone who's quick, who is big picture, who is very competitive. And guess what high dominance like winning. They like winning, and they like winning even with casualties. They will accept casualties. So when you watch her play, watch how the beginning, especially maybe the beginning in the middle of the series, you'll see in some of her, again, I don't know chess, but there's some intimations that, or at least people say that she takes on casualties to get that win. She's a hard charger, which is another high dominant element. And at the end, when she's fighting the Soviets, she has two choices. She could settle, or she can go and take the risk and get the big win. Who's Beth Harmon? Who is she? She is about winning. She is about being the best. She's about the big picture. That is her behaviorally. And what happens is, as she matures, she learns to adapt her behaviors. Just because she has those behaviors doesn't mean it's going to serve her in the best places, at the best times. When she fights the Soviets, she learns that she has to slow down some, which is another great element of maturity, of developing as an individual, that she knows who she is, but she realizes my strengths may not be the best here. I might have to slow down and adapt to the environment. It doesn't mean she's comfortable, but she does it anyway. So to me, this is just a fantastic element of someone who knows themselves, who is proud of their accomplishments. They're not humble. They're not arrogant. She knows she's good, and she carries herself the way she should. And she knows her behaviors. She knows what she's good at. She knows her styles, and she learns to adapt them. A great lesson in individualism. And finally, there's another theme, and that theme is reality focus. People being reality focused as opposed to emotionalism. One thing you learn about Beth is she realizes the world exists out there beyond her, and she has to adapt to it. So she knows she doesn't know everything. So what does she do? She reads book after book after book. What she does not do is just rely on her inner intuition. I just feel it. I just know it. I'm not going to read. I'm not going to study. I just know these things. She doesn't do that. She does the hard work. She learns from the best. She takes her time. And what does she do remember, she learns Russian. She actually takes up Russian to learn Russian. Why? She thinks it will help herself. So she's reality focused, meaning she is objective. She realizes that she doesn't know everything, that in order to be good, you have to adapt and to learn from the environment. And what does she do? She takes those measures to do that. And I would tell you another example of being reality focused. Maybe this goes to the Benevolent Universe. Some of her friends who were her competitors, some of her friends who have talent in chess, but can't make it as she can. So what do? They go find other jobs. And are they kicking and screaming? Are they screaming at, the social and struggle, the social injustice? The man's put me down. No, they hey, I'm good at this. I'm not great at it, and I can't make a living at it. So they move on. And these people even help her. So again, another element of just being reality focused, of not being mad at the universe when it doesn't just mold to your wishes or whims, but taking the world as it is, accepting it, and moving on. So finally, those are the themes. I think those themes are fantastic. I think it's rare to find a show that has themes like this. And ultimately, again, if you're going to be a disruptor, if you're going to be a leader, if you want to be successful, I think the idea of a benevolent universe, of having a purpose, of knowing your purpose, of being an individual, not being a cog in the wheel, but of being an individual, of standing up for what you want to do in life. You got one life, people, you got to live it. And this is a great movie, a great series that will give you the inspiration to do it, to show you that it can be done, and that you're worthy of it. If Beth Harmon can do this from growing up as an orphan, from all these negative elements of her background, and to rise to greatness, you can do it too. So saying that, again, I loved The Queen's Gambit, and I highly, highly recommend it. This is one of my all-time favorite series, and I don't know if I can even watch it again. It was so good. I don't know if I even want to ruin the experience by seeing a flaw in it. I'm not sure. So saying that, watch it, enjoy it, and really contemplate it, because I think there's some great lessons and you can learn from it. See you next week. Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe to iTunes and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Additionally, you can head over to my website, kevinblack.co. That's kevinblack.co to learn more. See you next week.